You're standing in front of a disk drive that shouldn't exist yet. It's September 1998, and you're holding the Sega Dreamcast, a machine that will play games downloaded from the internet before most people even knew what broadband was. Who narrates the stories of technology that arrives too early to survive? I'm Jacob, and today we're exploring how Sega engineered a console nearly a decade ahead of its time, only to watch the industry ignore it until it was far too late. The Dreamcast arrived with a specification sheet that read like science fiction to 1998. Inside that white and black plastic shell sat a Hitachi SH4 processor running at 200 MHz, paired with a PowerVR graphics chip that could render 3D environments with a fluidity that made the PlayStation look like it was running through mud. But here's what mattered more than the raw numbers. Sega's engineering team, led by console architect Tatsuo Yamamoto and his team at Sega's Technology Institute in Tokyo, had designed the entire system around something that didn't yet exist in most homes. The Dreamcast came with a modem built in, not as an accessory, built in. This was in 1998, when the average internet connection was still a scratching, howling sound through your computer's phone line. Shigeru Miyamoto, Nintendo's legendary game designer, said something quietly prophetic at the time. He didn't dismiss the Dreamcast's online ambitions. He simply observed that the world wasn't ready. He was right about the timing, but wrong about whether Sega's vision was sound. The modem inside that machine, a Yamaha component running at 56 kilobits per second, was the entire reason Sega built the Dreamcast at all. The company knew that the fifth generation of consoles, the era of the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64, was ending. What came next would be defined not by cartridges or discs played in isolation, but by connection. Sega's engineers understood this in their bones. The Dreamcast wasn't designed to compete with the PlayStation on graphics alone. It was designed to leapfrog the entire industry's understanding of what a home console could be. The problem was that Sega had built a vision of the future and tried to sell it to people living in the present. Every major decision in the Dreamcast's engineering contained the seeds of its own failure, though no one could have known it then. Take the GD-ROM, the proprietary disc format that Sega chose for game distribution. The GD-ROM could hold up to 1 gigabyte of data, substantially more than a PlayStation's standard CD-ROM, which maxed out at around 700 megabytes. Sega worked with the disc manufacturers, particularly Yamaha and Toshiba, to create a format that was theoretically more difficult to copy than standard CDs. The engineering was sound. The security was better than what PlayStation had, but it was also not perfect. And in the fast-moving world of 1999 and 2000, imperfect security in a proprietary format was an invitation. Within months of the Dreamcast launch in Japan in November 1998 and its North American release in September 1999, the modding community had begun working on the problem. By 2000, tools existed to copy GD-ROMs. By 2001, it was trivial. The Dreamcast became the first home console where you could burn your own games at home, using a regular PC and relatively inexpensive equipment. Sega's entire business model, which depended on controlling the software distribution pipeline, collapsed. The company had made another critical decision that seemed brilliant at the time. They decided not to charge developers licensing fees for Dreamcast games. This was revolutionary. It was also, in retrospect, catastrophic when combined with the piracy problem. Publishers could bring games to market cheaply, which meant more third-party support, which meant a larger game library, which meant more reasons to buy the hardware. But when that hardware also became a platform for freely distributed copies of games from around the world, the entire economic incentive structure evaporated. By 2001, surveys suggested that anywhere from 50 to 80% of Dreamcast games in circulation were pirated copies. Sega's engineering had been too trusting of the hardware's security, or perhaps too optimistic about human nature. And yet, underneath all of this, Sega's engineers had built something genuinely revolutionary. In 2000 and 2001, as the Dreamcast was slowly sinking, the company released a peripheral called the Broadband adapter. It was a sleek, white, external modem that connected to the Dreamcast expansion slot. It delivered Ethernet connectivity to a console at a moment when the idea of playing online games was still considered a novelty, something that might be fun in a few years, but not something mainstream gamers wanted right now. The Broadband adapter was designed by Sega's hardware team in collaboration with engineers at Intel and Broadcom. It was compact, reliable, and it worked. The problem was that broadband internet itself was still a luxury in most of North America in 2000. You had to want it. You had to pay for it separately, and you had to be willing to plug your gaming console into a wall jack instead of using the modem that came standard. Only around 200,000 broadband adapters were ever sold for the Dreamcast. The network capabilities of the system, designed years before Xbox Live and before the online gaming market even existed, remained largely untapped. Games like Quake 3 Arena, Unreal Tournament, and Phantasy Star Online arrived on the Dreamcast and found modest audiences of dedicated players. Phantasy Star Online, in particular, is now recognized as one of the first successful online multiplayer games on any console. It used Sega's server infrastructure, maintained in Sega's data centers, to create shared worlds that players could enter with their friends. The game came to market in 2000, a full 5 years before World of Warcraft and nearly 4 years before Xbox Live. But almost nobody noticed. The people who did notice, though, never forgot. Watching Phantasy Star Online run on the Dreamcast was like watching someone from the year 2005 play a game on a 1999 machine. It simply shouldn't have been possible. Sega's engineers had built a future that the world wasn't ready to step into. In the spring of 2001, Sega's financial reports told a story that no amount of engineering brilliance could overcome. The company had sold approximately 10 million Dreamcast units worldwide, a respectable number for any console, but not respectable enough. The PlayStation had sold 100 million. The Nintendo 64 was approaching 30 million. And the Dreamcast, with its cutting-edge processor and its built-in modem and its revolutionary online gaming capabilities, was not earning money. In fact, it was hemorrhaging money. The piracy problem had grown beyond anything Sega's engineers could have anticipated or fixed. The DVD player, which became standard in most homes by 2001, was something the Dreamcast didn't have. A curious omission that seemed to matter more to consumers than the ability to play games online. And perhaps most damning of all, Sony was already announcing the PlayStation 2, a machine that would play DVDs, that would be backward compatible with the original PlayStation's massive library of games, and that would eventually have its own online capabilities. Sega made the decision in January 2001 to discontinue the Dreamcast. The company would cease production by 2002. The announcement was quiet and matter-of-fact. An era of Sega as a hardware manufacturer stretching back through the Genesis, the Master System, and the arcade games that had defined the company, simply ended. In engineering terms, the Dreamcast was not a failure. By almost any technical measure, it was a success. The hardware was reliable, the processor was powerful, the online capabilities were genuine and functional and ahead of anything else on the market. But in market terms, in the terms of revenue and units sold and survival, the Dreamcast was a monument to the difference between being right and being early. Sega's engineers had built the future. They had simply built it in 1998 when the world was still living in 1995. The Dreamcast's legacy is stranger and more important than its sales figures suggest. Every online game you've played on a console, every matchmaking system that found you an opponent at 3 in the morning, every moment you've spent in a multiplayer world on hardware connected to the internet, traces a line back to what Sega's engineers accomplished in 1998. They were right about the future. They were just too far ahead of it. And that raises a question that echoes through the history of technology. How many other machines, how many other visions have been buried not because they were wrong, but because they were too far ahead of the people who might have loved them? That's a question that leads us somewhere darker. Because ahead of us is the story of a device that had all the right ideas, all the right technology, and all the right people believing in it. And it was killed, not by the market, but by a single moment of mockery, the Apple Newton. The story of how a joke on a television show can erase a future.